Group 31. Over the past 8 months, operating from the group's base in Heligoland, he and his crew had ranged as far afield as Norway's North Cape, shadowing the movements of the British Home Fleet. It had not all been easy. The group had lost 4 crews during the Norwegian campaign. One of them shot down by, of all things, an elderly Avro Anson of R.A.F. Coastal Command. The gunner had survived to tell the tale. The group's task now, during these first days of August 1940, was to plot the movements of British coastal convoys and pass on the information to Luftwaffe intelligence. The Battle of France had ended 6 weeks earlier, and now the Luftwaffe was gathering its strength for an all-out onslaught against England. Already the German bombers had been pounding the convoys in the Channel with the primary aim of bringing the British fighter squadrons into action. But the British had been clever, carefully husbanding their reserves of Spitfires and Hurricanes for the main battle that was to come, instead of frittering them away in skirmishes. Today, the North Sea was empty. There was no sign of any shipping creeping southwards in the shelter of the coast, just a few fishing craft that were not worth bothering about. Another 5 minutes, and it would be time to turn for home. Had the Dornier pilot but known it, his presence had not gone undetected. Off Eyemouth, naval personnel on board an innocent-looking trawler had already flashed details of the German aircraft's course and speed to a communications centre at Rosyth. From there, the information had been transmitted to the RAF fighter control room at Euston in Northumberland. A flight of Hurricanes from Acklington had searched for the Dornier, but failed to locate it. The grey camouflaged aircraft was difficult to spot, flying low above the waves. The young Dornier pilot had just begun to turn away from the coast, his mission completed, when his gunner gave a shout of alarm over the intercom. The pilot tightened the turn, looking back as he did so, and in that instant he saw the British fighter. It was a Spitfire, flying so low that its slipstream furrowed the sea. The Dornier's gunner opened fire, and the pilot saw an avenue of white splashes creep towards the British fighter. Then the Spitfire opened up too. And suddenly, the interior of the Dornier's fuselage was a nightmare of flying metal and screaming men as a solid burst of machine gun fire tore into it. The rear gun ceased firing abruptly. The navigator shrieked, rose from his seat, and took a few stumbling steps aft, both hands clasped over his eyes. He was already dead. A bullet had removed the top of his skull. He fell in a heap and lay still. The Spitfire came in again, this time from the beam, firing as the Dornier turned away desperately. The young pilot screamed as a bullet shattered his right shoulder blade and emerged just under the collarbone, a white-hot lance of agony. He coughed, and blood spattered the front of his flying overall. Somehow, he retained control, pointing the bow of the flying boat out to sea. He managed to twist in his seat and look back through a red mist of pain in time to see the Spitfire curving in for another attack. A devout Roman Catholic, he closed his eyes for an instant and forced his numb brain to make an act of contrition. Then he waited for the burst of fire that would send the Dornier and its crew to their graves. It never came. Instead, the Spitfire swept past, climbed and turned, and came in from astern once more. There was still no fire, and the British pilot repeated the procedure all over again. He pursued the crippled flying boat for another couple of minutes, then turned and flew away towards the land. The Dornier limped out to sea. It was riddled with holes, but both engines were still running. The pilot, coughing up his lungs and passing out from time to time with pain, somehow managed to hold his course. Each time he fainted, he pulled the flying boat's nose up just in time to avoid diving into the water. 90 minutes later, he saw a ship. It was a German minesweeper. At his last gasp, he smacked the Dornier down onto the sea 100 yards from the vessel. A boat put out, and seamen lifted him from the shattered cockpit together with the bodies of the rest of the crew. On the captain's orders, gunners sank the flying boat with 2 rounds. The pilot lingered in delirium for 2 days before